look at 4-1, and I'm going to post a reminder to everybody on this as well, but just remember that when you see an accidental in a measure, it lasts for the remainder of the measure. So um, this is something you're going to have to worry about a lot on 4-2, but in 4-1, in measure 6, you have an E flat to start the measure, and that affects the next E. So you got E flat, and then you have two more E flats in the measure. So just be careful on 4-1 and 4-2 as you're looking at accidentals. You'll see a number of them, and from the point that they're written to the end of the measure, they continue to be in effect. So if you have an accidental that's written on beat 3, it doesn't obviously affect anything that's on beat 1 or 2. But if you have something on beat 1, it would affect any notes that's in 1, 2, 3, or 4. They're supposed to be very specific, so they're going to be in exactly the octave. So if you have an E flat that's written on the first line of the treble clef, and there's an E somewhere else in the measure an octave higher, it doesn't affect that E. It would only affect the specific note, specific octave. And as soon as you pass the bar line, it goes away. And what you'll see in some pieces would be if in one measure you had, for example, an E flat, and then the next measure began on an E, just to avoid confusion, sometimes they'll put the natural sign in parentheses as a reminder. We just call them courtesy accidentals. So they don't really need to be there because, it's obvious it's an E, it's in the key signature that, no sharps in the flats. But if you had just played one in the earlier measure, sometimes they will kind of add those. And there's a courtesy accidental in measure 4 of 4.1, and it's a natural sign. Don't confuse it with a sharp or a flat sign. And it's just saying, hey, you played F sharps earlier in the measure before, but when we get to this measure, it's an F natural. So make sure you play F natural. The challenge to 4-1, I think, is the quarter note triplets. And if you're not used to that rhythm, getting 3 notes in 2 beats is not easy to do. You really have to get a sense of that triple, this, triple, that. So the first note's right on the downbeat. In this case, if we're looking at measure 6, it's on the downbeat of beat 3. But then over 2 beats, you have to play 3 notes that are all exactly the same length. And sometimes it's easier to imagine it, I think, if you're counting in 2. So you count beat 1 and beat 3, and that way you have 3 notes and kind of 1 pulse. And that's much easier. But I'm going to play a few times, and I'll play a few triplets. And for me, when I'm learning these rhythmic figures, it's helpful to just group a set of notes together and play them so the first note's on the pulse. So as an example, if I play C on quarter note, or if I want 8 notes, so the hard part is those 3 notes over 2 beats. So that's the feel of 3 against the 2. I'm not sure if I can count it and not screw it up. So I'll play measure 6 would be 1, 2. Be really careful. I think that's really the only tricky part of that piece is getting those triplets even. Another way, sometimes if you're using a DAW and you can program in some quarter note triplets and then play along with it to get a sense of how they feel. It's when you start, there's a lot of music where you have numbers that don't correspond to where the pulse of the piece is. It's not uncommon to see 3s against 1 beat, or in classical music, you sometimes will see phrasings with 5 notes or 7 notes. And of course, they can't line, even though they're supposed to all be the same length. It's challenging against 2 beats to have 7 or to have 5 or 5 against 1. And so those are the places where you really have to slowly kind of work it out, start to hear it. I think the computer can help you, because if you program an exact then by listening and replicating what it is you're hearing, you can get it. In certain metronomes, like on an iPad, I have one that I could do any divisions on, 3s and 2s or 5s, but maybe you don't need that, I'm not sure. So I'm going to also talk about 4-2. And there's two things with this. One, be really careful with the accidentals, like I said. So, for example, in measure 3, there's two D flats. There's one on the upbeat of beat 2, but there's also one on the upbeat of beat 4. Even though it's not an additional flat written, it maintains because the flat earlier is still in the same measure. There's a courtesy accidental on the third line, second measure. It just shows, okay, this is an F natural. So you put that in parentheses just to remind you. In terms of reading it, you want to think in terms of shape of all of these. And I'm going to pop the video on and try to demonstrate. Hopefully, I don't know, are you seeing me or no?
Yes.
No, you are, okay. I was waiting, getting some sort of response on my iPad. So, with these pieces, I can't show both hands at once very easily, but I'm gonna hold the iPad up and just show overhead. So you've got groupings of 3 notes, and I've had students tell me, oh, I can't possibly reach some of these groupings, and you can as long as you move, that's not bad, right? If you move your hand in on the keys, so the first one's easy, it's A, G, E. So you might want to practice a little bit just playing them all together so you get a sense of, where is a good hand position. And your thumb should never be hanging off the edge, it should be over a key. Now the next grouping is A, F, and D flat. So if you look at your hand, obviously, the pinky's shortest finger and then the thumb's mounted way back. If I do this, then all of a sudden they're very close to being in the same position. So when I roll it over on the key, it makes it a little bit easier, and I just move my hand in and out. So A, F, D flat, I don't have to reach at all. It's very easy. Back to the next group of 3 notes. The next group, and Paul challenges you a little bit in that you wrote the same note a few different ways. So you'll know in the first line you have a D flat, in the next line you have a C sharp. Well, it's the same note, it's written a different way. And then the third line you have F sharp, and then it moves to F natural. And be really careful, I think this is the trickiest one, and I probably wouldn't normally write it this way. I think he wrote it this way just to make sure you're paying attention. But you have an A, an E, and a D flat. And I'm not sure I would write it this way because when you look at the E and the D flat, they look like they're very close together, even though they're a minor third apart. So in notating it to make it as easy as possible to read, I would probably go with a C sharp because seeing the E to the C sharp is a little more of a visual representation of that minor third rather than the D flat, even though they're ultimately the same. And then lastly, this is swing feel. So instead of thinking 1 and 2 and like straight, it's a little more like a triplet. It's the way it's shown in the notation with the quarter note and the 8th note. So in that, you would think like a triplet, or 1 and 2. So triplets or swing. 1, watch the rest. So on the upbeat of beat 2, you're not making any sound, and a little bit of an accent on that last note of each phrase. And then maybe I'll show just one more shot with my left hand. I can do this. So here's my left hand. Seeing that, playing in this block. Block of notes. So it should feel pretty comfortable. pinky is playing maybe almost halfway. That way my thumb is up at the keyboard. It's much easier if you're doing it like that. Get your hand position. Because I have seen people with their thumb here and trying to stretch and twist their wrists and stuff, and I think that's very uncomfortable. So do that. And as I'm dropping things into my piano. Any questions or anything that I can go over or help out on?
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
This is on assignment 4.2, and like the first measure and the third measure, you give us fingerings, but are you suggesting that we always have to be parallel when left and right when we're doing fingerings? For example, the second to last measure, where you're going A, E, and then the D flat.
Yep.
I mean, it's easier for me, for example, to do it differently on my right than on my left. Or do you want us to be in parallel?
No. I would think it would be easier. So in that particular phrase, I would say my right hand, I would use my pinky, my second finger, and my thumb.
Exactly.
And then my left hand, I'd probably use my pinky, my third finger, and my...
That's what I was... Okay, I just wanted to make sure we don't have to necessarily have to be parallel to every... Okay.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It does show up that way. Yeah, I think it would be, if the F is in the right hand, like the line above it, I'd probably use my third. But with the E, I would definitely use my second finger.
Yeah, okay, all right. And you definitely wanted the swing in the 4/8 notes too. That's what I...
Yeah, that would be...
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay.
I think if you're playing against the backing track, you would probably naturally kind of just gravitate towards swinging it, because the rest of the track is really giving you a swing feel.
Okay, all right, good.
Yep. Anything else? Any Patriots parade questions?
It should practice, because in this assignment, in chapter 4 or lesson 4, there's like 5 exercises, and then there's the thumb exercise, and then there's these 2 assignments. And I'm finding that, I could spend all week trying to master the exercises, before I ever make it to the assignment. So I'm not sure how I should attack all this stuff.
Yeah, I think everyone's going to be a little bit different, but in the case where, what you're describing is true, I would take the first day and kind of walk through everything just to get an overview of everything that's in the lesson and get a sense of which ones are going to be most challenging and which pieces are going to require the most effort, with the notion that, you have to be able to play those 2 assignment pieces by the end. So maybe, during the week, however you break up the practice time, you're always spending some time on the assignment pieces, even from the first day of that you practice, and then you try to balance the time so you feel like you're doing enough on the assignments that by the end of the week you'll be able to get them pretty comfortably. I know that can be tricky. I mean, the pieces that we have besides the assignments are helpful to develop the technique to be able to play the assignments, so they're good to do, but given that we're limiting everyone to a week, it's a little different than what a private lesson would be, whereas if you needed more time, you could just say, well, let's take another week on this piece. You do have to kind of balance it that way. So see how that goes, and you can always circle back if you have a little more time. And at some point, when the course is over, you have the course also for another year. So a lot of people will wind up kind of going back through everything and spending more time on the stuff that they didn't really get a chance to work on to where it felt completely comfortable.
Okay, as a follow-up, I'm wondering, is there like a recommended length of time where you would sit down and actually practice, like an hour 3 times a day, or, I find after an hour I start losing it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think, especially at first, an hour is a pretty long time for someone that's learning to play an instrument to sit, in one sitting. So, I think it's fantastic if you're able to do that a couple of times a day. I mean, there's no answer. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people 30 minutes, 40 minutes, once a day would be enough, and some people it takes longer. Everyone comes into the class with slightly different experiences. Some people have had accomplished on maybe another musical instrument, and the transition to keyboard's not too bad. And then other people don't have very much experience and haven't gone through that process. So it's very hard for me to be sure, but I would agree that for most people, 30 minutes to 60 minutes is the most you'd want to sit at one time, and maybe if you find yourself mentally or physically feeling just tired, then get up and take a break. And if you can get back later in the day and do a little bit more, then I think that's great too. So if you're doing that and you're able to do that, I think that's a great plan. Did that answer, or is there even more?
No, that was great, thanks.
Okay, good, yeah. I mean, that's a good amount of time, so my expectation's pretty realistic. I know that it's very challenging, and again, we have such a wide range of students, so I'm also, I've said before, if you need to play at the slower tempo, that's fine, just let me know in the post, or if you had particular difficulty with something, if there's errors or something, I'll let you fix it and repost. So, if you ever have any questions, just let me know, and I'll work with you on whatever. But so far, so good, I think.
Yeah, so far,
We'll challenge you every week.
yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm gonna log off. If anybody needs me, you know how to get hold of me. Just send me a message, and I'll get right back to you.